Well, what did he say? Victor looked anxiously at his wife Marina as she left the doctor's office. Without even looking at Vitya, she grabbed her bag and went down the corridor. Tuk-tuk, tuk-tuk, her heels banged on the too-clean tiled floor. Marishka was disgusted with the shiny brown patterns she saw too often, rhombuses with petals in the corners on a creamy white background. These curtains were light and airy, not blocking the light at all. The beating sun at the antenatal clinic tried to climb into every corner of the medical institution built to give families joy. But Marina and Victor were not so joyful, as they had spent the 4th year of their marriage in 1,000 queues of people sitting at the doctor's office for tests and examinations. Encouraging nods and words were all they received. My sister has already given birth to a 3rd one. And my friends at work go on maternity leave one after another, Marina said. Only Marina, from time to time, left the doctor's office with sad, empty eyes. No sorry, Marish, the doctor said. Well, sometimes hormones still have a thyroid gland. Let's give you medicine for 6 months, drink it, then come back. Sasha Marishka jumped up and clenched her hands into fists and looked angrily at the doctor. Sasha, I'm already 30. I'll wait another 6 months, and then another, and then you will tell me that I'm already old, or my husband will leave me because he wants a child. And I can't. You just need to rest in vain. Your body is already tired of the drugs, the procedures, and your nerves. In the end, you twitched, Vitka. Take a vacation, get distracted. Patients who peacefully folded their hands on their tummies listened to what was happening in the office of Alexander Tokmachev, the gynecologist of one of the maternity hospitals in the southwest of Moscow. This time, everything finally worked out. If only Vitya had known, Marina wanted to have a romantic evening, bake a cake, and that's when the tea would be a dark reddish ruby gleam in cups, catching the dance of candles when they were alone. That's when she would tell him that he soon would become a dad. How many times had she imagined this picture? She saw her husband's eyes, surprised, a little frightened, and happy. 100 times she had thought about what she would experience when she told her mother or sister, or if she should not tell anyone at all so as not to scare away happiness like a small butterfly accidentally sitting on her hand. But no, apparently the Lord did not want to give this pair of children something that was not quite right, something that angered the heavenly Lord. That was just what Marina could not understand in any way, and maybe there was no one behind the sky hung with cotton clouds. But there were just cells, hormones, chromosomes, and everything about Sasha that he also said at every appointment. They drove home silently, and then Marish's phone rang. Victor, without taking his eyes off the road, nodded at the bag in which he peeped the waltz of his cell wife. Yes, this is my mother, I won't answer. Why? Vitya quickly looked at Marina. She will begin to feel sorry for me again. I don't want her to worry about me. Answer, well, please. Feel sorry for the pathetic Vitya, Marina said. I'm pathetic. Yes, wretched, broken with genetic disorders. So it is written on the card. What kind of nonsense is normal? You quit. Well, how is Anka, my sister? Is she normal? Once in the first gave birth, then the second, now the third, Victor said. Girls from work look at me like I'm a bald dog that was picked up on the street by disabled people. It's disgusting to you. It all seems. Victor fell silent. My mother called Marina's cell 3 more times, then Victor's phone vibrated. Hello, Tamara Petrovna. We are in the car, you are on speakerphone. Well, Vityash, something's wrong with Marinka. She's not suitable for the phone. What do you have there? Marina looked sternly at her husband. He shrugged his shoulders. We're going home. Marina is tired and dozing, Victor stumbled. But really, what did Sasha say? Alexander Tokmachev was a school friend of Victor's in childhood. They lived in neighboring 5-story buildings that were recently. The text needs significant improvement in terms of grammar and coherence. Here is a possible revised version. The building was razed to the ground by a large and indifferent excavator. Despite this, the guys played football together and then signed up for the hockey section. Carrying a bag was absolutely necessary, and it was hard. They didn't happen to go further. You know who you want to become, Vitya? Carefully unwrapping the ice cream, he turned to his friend. I'm a doctor, he said. And you? Don't know yet? Many years had passed since then, and Sasha and Victor hadn't seen each other for a long time. But once, at a meeting of school graduates, old friends met again. Victor was still the same thin, pale man in a beautiful, well-ironed shirt, standing at the entrance to the school building. On the field, the boys were playing football cheerfully, noisily, and quarreling. The girls, perhaps already the children of Vicky's classmates, were sitting to the side, whispering and exchanging photographs on mobile phones. Life went on, and at the same time, as if circling, chasing the children along the same path, allowing them to feel the same that their parents once felt. Here, the boy, the goalkeeper, missed the ball, and his team hooted and poked their fingers at him violently, expressing displeasure. The goalkeeper drooped, ashamed and offended by his awkwardness. But then everything got better. Because there is always someone who, waving his hand, says, I got it, and kicks the ball into the thick of the guys. Life would flow, hurried onto the stream, washing the stones of memory. From your thoughts? Yes, it's a pity only for the goalkeeper. Cruelly, they will dig into his phone less. He's such an open mind. Your Vitya raised his eyebrows in surprise. You wrote that you are very small and small. He was 10 years ago, and now it's quite nothing. Soon up to size 40, the leg will grow. Yes, are you Vitya? Respectfully shook his head. Well, are you married? Children? Sasha, seeing how embarrassed his friend was, immediately hastened to apologize. Although I'm sorry, I'm somehow immodest, probably nothing. Yes, Marina and I got married. Remember I wrote about a girl whom we met during a campaign. Yes, of course, I remember. You were with the guys during the Oka incident. You still caught fish and it all burned out at the stake. Well, in general, it's been 5 years since the children got married. Vicky sighed and shook his head. Not yet, but we are working on it. Sasha knew this phrase all too well. We are working on it. This is how they always answer annoying interlocutors when they pry into their personal lives, causing pain and inconvenience. This is how they answer when children still do not appear, and everyone around is waiting for them as if their lives depend on it. Sasha and his colleagues helped someone at the reception, but he had to part with someone without seeing the happy eyes of the future mother. The mystery of the emergence of a new life does not always allow one to help oneself, but no one is going to give up. Sasha wanted to say this to Vicky right away, but then decided not to impose. The friends talked about all sorts of trifles while sitting on a wide wooden windowsill in the corridor of the 3rd floor of the school, watching the sun bathe in a pinkish-gray haze. Are you working now? Vitya put a glass of cold tea on the windowsill and jumped to the floor, stretching his legs. Yes, here in the consultation. At the antenatal clinic in the maternity hospital, Sasha replied. Vitya looked at his friend in surprise. Wait, you seem to have become a doctor. I thought you said. Sasha smiled. As a dentist, but it just so happened that my wife told me to become a gynecologist, and she was not mistaken. Vitya swallowed convulsively. Yes, how do you work with them? With whom? Women? They are like a volcano. They sleep, then they start yelling. Moreover, if pregnant women are involved, at our work, the boss seemed to get pregnant, that is, she became pregnant. In general, it became unpredictable, Alexander grinned. By and large, this was not his merit, but that of Sasha's mentor who saw in his student someone to whom he could transfer his knowledge without fear of wasting time. The friends talked a little more, then Sasha went home. Sorry, tomorrow is going to be a difficult day. You still have to take your wife to the dacha and drive the child home, Alexander said, shaking out his outstretched hand. You know, if anything, contact me. Here's my business card. Call Marina, we'll talk. But everything is fine with us. Though, I hurried to say, Vitya, I just believe. So, just in case. At night, Vitya went to the kitchen and turned on his laptop. He found Alexander Tokmachev on the internet, a successful doctor who dealt with Marishka's problem. The man read the reviews, then got up and began to feverishly walk around the kitchen. On one side, Marina, as he felt, was on the verge of despair, rushing from one doctor to another. She had already donated so much blood and drank so many different pills, but everything was to no avail. She had gone to surgery several times, and again this did not lead to anything. Perhaps fate brought him back to Sasha for a reason. Maybe this is a sign from the other. Well, how can you send your wife to your friend, especially on such a delicate issue? Vitya was somehow uncomfortable. Some kind of stupid jealousy and a possessive feeling suddenly warmed up inside. No, he stupidly nodded to his thoughts and went to bed. The business card remained lying on the kitchen table. Marina, come in please, Sasha said, carefully looking at the timid, sad woman with a sigh. He sank into a chair. Do you have any papers with you? The results of the examinations? Marina nodded and took out a thick folder of analyses, conclusion charts, and recommendations from her bag. Sleepless nights and meaningless days waiting for the result. Bitter disappointment and new walking in a circle. Everything was neatly put into the files, soulless plastic bags shining under the lamp with a cold silver light. Sasha carefully flipped through the folder, now frowning, now grinning, then he slammed it shut. Raising his eyes, he said, Marina, you went through a lot. What is described here was superfluous in my opinion, but it's not for me to judge my colleagues. What do you think? Marina was confused, and what could she even think? She's not a doctor and doesn't understand. At least all those to whom she addressed before said, well, she stretched out. You yourself, what do you think? Is it possible for you and your husband to have children? The woman thought for a moment and said, you understand I can't work with someone who does not believe in success. Sooner or later, through difficulties, perhaps through pain, but I would like to know what you see ahead. The purpose of this path. Well, I was told so much about some genetic features and hormones. I don't know whether I believe that we will succeed in the suite. And then Marina described her unborn child. She suddenly saw it so clearly, his dark hair in front of him, like his dad, an elongated face and thin shoulders, but her eyes were her Marina's. Somehow it turned out by itself that there could be no other options for a child. She didn't tell her husband. Then she finally admitted that her attending physician was Dr. Tokmachev. I hope you weren't offended, she looked anxiously at the video. He's your school friend, I understand, but they say a lot of good things about him. He somehow made me believe again for the next appointments. Vitya and Marina went together. But here again, failure. Marina hoped so much, but Tokmachev turned out to be not a magician. Everything was Vit. I need to take a break from everything. Looking at the city flashing at night outside the windows, she said, I'll go to Montsevo to Aunt Valia. The midges have already subsided, they won't have a bite. I'll live there for a week or two. I can take a vacation so quickly. Vitya was a little confused. I want to be alone. I need to think. I'm tired and I need to take a break from everything. Come on, I'll take you on the weekend. For hours behind the wheel. No thanks, I don't want to worry myself. Marina suddenly became distant and cold. Victor wanted to touch her, but she gently removed his hand and said, I'll go and collect things. The curtain was still swaying from her touch, and the amber golden tea brewed in a beautiful cast iron teapot had not yet cooled on the table. However, Marina was no longer there. Her soul was eager to leave the city and inhale the aroma of resin warmed up in the sun, hear the sound of a fishing motorboat rushing along the Oka River in the middle of the night, and feel the sand between her fingers without preventing it from falling to the ground. In the evening, Marina's Aunt Valia threw up her hands and ran out of the house. Victor watched the car rush away and didn't understand if Marina was happy or sad. How glad I am to see you, my girl, Aunt Valia exclaimed as she embraced Marina, whom she had loved since childhood. Marina had spent her childhood in this village with Aunt Valia, her cousins, and her sister. I don't understand, you're some kind of sad. Valentina carefully looked into the face of her niece. No, the woman just waved her tired. I can take a room on the second floor for a week or two. Of course, Valentina replied. Okay, let's get settled. I'll go and cook something. Valia fussed over and over, stroking the guest on the shoulder, as if not believing that Marina was really alive from flesh and blood. Marina, you can take things yourself. Yes, everything myself. Thank you. And now the kettle whistles indignantly, frying on a burner with a burning blue flame, and ruddy glazed pancakes jump onto a plate from a frying pan. Having washed themselves with butter, they seem to start mischievously smiling and asking to be eaten. The sunset is lilac and bright, as if skillfully spilled across the sky. The paint is reflected in the windows of the veranda. Pine trees stretch out with orange-yellow trunks a little to the left of the fallen house and exude a tart aroma. Weary needles in the sun. Aunt Valia ran to the pantry that loomed behind the house on the white four walls. Now wait, dear. Valia noticed that Marishka had dull eyes, an absent-minded expression, and moved sluggishly and weakly. Valia was carrying a jar of jam when the guests asked if Marishka had arrived. Baba Pasha smiled and mysteriously shook her head, saying that Vitya couldn't work for Marishka alone. She suggested giving Marishka a lot of sweets and handed her a jar of jam before shrugging her shoulders. Valentina nodded and ran back to treat the guests, saying hello from Pasha's woman as she climbed the wooden steps to her veranda. The guests left for the island again in the morning, and Marina stretched out, saying she wanted to remember the evening. Valentina was frightened as she looked at Marina, who suddenly came to life and said she would go by bike and take a food tent. Marina's soul seemed to dance as she talked about her bike, which was standing in the barn. Aunt Valia folded her arms across her chest and sighed, saying her guys would take Marina back from the city on a boat. However, Marina smiled and winked at the hostess, saying that the richer ones came by boat, while the simpler ones walked from coast to coast on foot. Closer to August, the water between the Big Earth and the island reached the waist, and people could safely leave their bikes and wade to the island. There, white fine sand covered the shore with an even soft layer of seagulls, who chased away uninvited guests that disturbed their peace. The waves quietly rustled with shells and licked the shore, affectionately tied up with them in warm, calm water. Marina carefully packed everything they needed in a backpack and drove along the road. The breeze pleasantly cooled the skin from the river, pulling the smell of fish with it. The sun slowly rolled out its golden disk, dispersing the morning haze. There stood Pasha, the ubiquitous woman who had gathered at such an early hour. She was already standing at the fallen gate on the island, directly rested, and had to do everything there. Valentina shrugged her shoulders and said, "Yeah, and she doesn't even need to carry such weights with a backpack." Valia came closer, straightening her kerchief on the go, and said, "She's strong for us for two. She lives now to be where you should you think." Pasha just nodded. Valentina pressed her hand to her mouth and looked after her departed niece. "And what should I do now?" she asked her husband. "Call Baba Pasha," Vitya replied over her shoulder. "No matter how bad things happen to her." Aunt Valia found the cell phone on the table and dialed a number, but Vitya did not answer. He always turned off the sound at night, and the alarm clock had not yet woken up. It should ring only in half an hour. Marina hung a heavy backpack on her back, threw the bicycle into the bushes, and, taking off her slippers, entered the water. Something painfully pricked her stomach, and her back ached. The water in the river seemed unusually cold, but the woman nevertheless went forward. Her feet felt the muddy soft bottom, and her legs every now and then touched her frightened rushing hands in shallow water. The sun had already emerged from its cradle, joyfully gurgling and throwing thin rays of golden threads. Marina sank on the sand and smiled joyfully. "How good! How good!" she thought. Many times she had seen this place in her dreams. She missed it on heavy icy winter evenings when she had to stand at the bus stop and wait for the bus. She also remembered when the doctors tied Marina's hands with straps to the table and put a mask on her face, giving anesthesia. Before I switched off my consciousness, I was transported to a white sand island, lost in the bustle of life. I felt good, so good that Marina suddenly jumped up and began to throw shells and spin like a child, leaving footprints in the sand. After swimming, she had breakfast and lay down in the shade to rest from something strong. I wanted to sleep. Sasha came to work and, as usual, the first thing he did was look at the fresh patient analyses lying on the table. He quickly turned on the computer to check and call the laboratory. However, they just shrugged their shoulders and said the same numbers that were on the printout. "Marina, pick up the phone," Alexander hit the table with his fist. "Well, where did you go?" "Okay, let's call Victor." He repeatedly dialed his friend's number, but he didn't hear the call while standing in a crowded subway car. "What's going on? Where did everyone go?" Sasha laughed joyfully and rubbed his hands. Marinka's phone rang again, and Aunt Valia picked up the phone. "Hello," she said timidly. After hearing that Alexander was calling Marina, she heard a loud voice and realized that Marina had forgotten her phone at home and went for a walk. "I need Marina urgently," Alexander said. "There is no Marina, and in general, she is married." Valentina suddenly got angry and disconnected. Sasha looked at the dead screen in confusion. He was also married and whispered to Marina, who was either waking up or plunging into a slumber. Marina wanted to eat and drink, but the reserve she had taken with her quickly ran out. She frowned while chewing her sandwich and had to walk slowly along the water's edge, feeling like a wave, like a thin, almost imperceptible lace, running away from under her feet and back into the river a little further on. On a branch of a slightly dusty bush with grains of sand, a brisk sparrow chirped, turning with his whole body and spreading his little tail. Seagulls wandered along the shore, and someone started the motorboat while looking at the woman in the distance. Her sound burst into the rustle of the waves and was repeatedly amplified. Water spread along the river, and Marina wanted to take a nap. She returned to her resting place and lay down on a towel. Victor raced along the highway, holding the steering wheel with his hands shaking with excitement. He needed to go to the village to tell Marina so many things, but she wasn't answering his calls. The overheated car roared, and he prayed it wouldn't stall. In her head, there were no thoughts, only some fragments of what Sasha had said. His instructions and directions flashed at a furious speed. There was an indignant beeping, but Vitya didn't care. The man literally burst into the yard of Valentina. "Marina! Marina!" he shouted. Aunt Valia jumped out of the house, asking what he was yelling about. "I almost died. Where's my wife?" Victor looked sternly at the hostess of the house. "On the island. In the morning, she left." "I thought she told you." Valia spread her hands in confusion. "Is her phone turned off or something? I don't remember how to get there. Marina must return today." "No, tomorrow. She took a tent with her." "What kind of tent promises a thunderstorm?" "I can't go." "Oh, I didn't understand anything." "So take my bike. Along this road, you will reach the barrier. Tell the guard that it's from me. Let him show you the way further. Then there will be one more barrier. After him, along the path to the left," but Vitya no longer listened. He furiously pedaled the bicycle, looking at the sky. The downpour lashed her cheeks, not letting her breathe. Marina, hiding under a short tree, tried to put up a tent, but the wet knitting needles slipped out of her hands. The wind threw the fabric on her legs, dousing them with cold water. Marina suddenly began to cry, feeling sorry for herself as if the whole world had taken up arms against her. She felt like she was being punished for something, not letting her hide from the rain. The woman threw a tent over herself like a raincoat, sat on a log, and huddled up, watching the wind play in waves like a book. The wind would throw the pages away and then weave them back again, hissing with the surf. Marina heard a woman's voice somewhere in the distance. A woman jumped up from the other bank, plunging almost up to her neck, and a man called out to her. Marina called to her, then choked into the raging Oka. "Where are you, Vitya?" "This is Vitya," whispered Marishka, rushing to the water's edge. "You don't swim well, Vitya." She was shaking with cold fear, and some new feeling cramped her muscles, running all over her body with prickly hedgehogs. "Marina, what are you doing to me with wet blue lips?" Victor fell off the shore and grabbed his wife by the hand, yelling at her. "Why didn't you pick up the phone? Are you really? Where did you go? What am I doing here?" Victor stopped abruptly and pulled Marina to him. "Sasha called you urgently to the hospital, Marina." "Why? Am I dying? I have oncology." Marina burst into tears, terrified, grabbing her husband by the shoulders. "To go to the hospital, you. What did you say?" Marina unclenched her hands and recoiled. "What did you say?" They waited out the storm, hiding in a tent, and with their love, they were so warm and so scared they wanted to scream. But happiness loves silence. As soon as the river calmed down a little for the guys, a motorboat, Aunt Valia, came up to their legs. The entire population of the village, deciding that something terrible had happened to Marina, waited anxiously. Baba Pasha calmly said after the fleeing Valia, "Yes, what could happen there? Nothing would happen before February." Marina went to her house to finish her tea with a mint leaf. The following year, in July, Marina and her son arrived closer. A strong boy was lying in a stroller and loudly called his mother. She closed her eyes but still couldn't breathe in the muggy summer air. Looking at the sky, she whispered words of gratitude. Dear listener, if you enjoyed this story, please subscribe to our channel, like, and be sure to write your comment.